Hi, welcome to part two of our introduction to human geography. And I want to talk a little bit about mental maps. Mental maps are essentially how we perceive other places. It is the ideas that we get in our head of where places are located and characteristics about them. It doesn't mean that we really know anything about the place. It doesn't mean that we have to have been there before or that we really know anything about it. But if I throw out a name of a place, there are probably certain images that will come to mind, and you'll have some sense in your mind of where you think that is located. And one of the objectives of this class is to try to broaden that mental map, because your mental map may not necessarily be incorrect. It just may not be as full as it could possibly be, or it could be incorrect, especially when it comes to location. And the goal is to correct that through our map locations on the exams. So if I were to throw out a name like Kenya, for instance, there are probably certain things that come to mind regarding where you think that is. Maybe you might say Africa, and that's about as far as you can get, and that's fine. There may be other people that might be able to narrow that down to a specific region of Africa, or narrow it down to the point that they can not only tell you where in Africa it is, but what other countries border it. So the degree of accuracy of the mental map of where it is going to vary from person to person. Also, you're going to have ideas about the characteristics of that place. And everyone will have different things that come to mind, once again, when they think of Kenya. Now, some people may be reluctant to share their mental maps, but things that come up in class all the time when I throw out this topic, people might say things like animals because they're familiar with watching safari shows. They might say woodlands or savanna, or even marathon runners. Okay, so these are part of a mental image. Doesn't mean it's correct or incorrect. It's just these are the images that come to mind. Now, does that mean that's all that Kenya is? Of course not. We know that. But we often form our mental map around media and what we hear from other people. So, for example, living in Fresno, if I talk to people from other parts of the United States, when they hear I'm living in California, the perception is that I live on the beach and I kind of rub shoulders with celebrities every day. So there really isn't a concept of how large the state is and how diverse the state is. Their image of California is Southern California, and that's it. So really no concept that there's desert here, that there's mountains here, that there is snow here, all of those types of things. That's a mental map. And it goes both ways. I'm sure, well, I know if I talk to people in California about other parts of the United States, I get similar answers. If I were to throw out France, you might say, well, it's in Europe. Okay. That again, that might be as far as you can get. Maybe you'll have images. Maybe you'll think of the Eiffel Tower or berets or croissants or whatever. I mean, certain images are going to come to mind. Are they accurate? Are they as full as they can be? If you go to France, are you going to see someone in a beret? I'm sure. If you look hard enough, you will. But that's not all of it. So there are other components to that, and that's what we're going to try to do in this class, is fill in those missing gaps of information. So the mental map is how we perceive other places, whether we have actually been there or not. We usually have an opinion of it. We usually have some sense of where it is. Even if you have no idea where it is, you'll probably have a sense in your mind of whether it's close or far, if you've never heard of the place, for example. And it also refers to what we think a place is like. What we think a place is in our mind, or the characteristics of that place. 5 themes of geography. We've already discussed what geography is, right? The study of spatial relations expressed as patterns and processes. But several decades ago, the National Council for Geographic Education decided that perhaps they should come up with some themes and some standards regarding geography. And these were essentially formed to make it easier for people to teach geography, particularly those that were going to teach high school geography or high school social studies. But these themes and standards soon evolved to cover geography classes at all levels. And these themes are important because they are really the cornerstone themes of the discipline. And no matter which geography class you take, it will focus on one or more of these themes. And this particular class will touch on all of these themes. So for each one of these themes, I want you to know not only what they are, okay, a working definition, but I also want you to have examples of each theme, be able to apply each theme, and I'll give you plenty of examples for each one. So the first one we're going to cover is location, which is very simple, where something is. Okay, that's a very obvious theme for geography. But within location, there are 2 types that I want you to know: absolute location and relative location. Absolute location and relative location. And depending upon what you're trying to accomplish, one's going to be much more important than the other. Absolute location is the exact point on the map. It's the exact point on the map. Another way of saying that is the geographic coordinates, okay, or the longitude or latitude. That's going to be very important for particular situations. Relative location, which is the other type of location, is where something is in relation to something else. Where something is in relation to something else. So is it next door to, down the street from, etc. And again, that type of location is going to be important depending upon what your objective is. So for example, if you're walking on campus and you wanted to find the science building and you didn't know where it was, and you asked somebody, where's the science building? Would you want them to answer you an absolute location and relative location, or relative location? You would want them to say, well, do you know where the Satellite Student Union building is? Yeah, well, it's next to that. Do you know where Peters is? Yes, well, it's across the lawn from that. Okay, so they kind of start with a landmark. Do you know where this is? And this is where this building is relative to or in relation to this building. You wouldn't want them to give you absolute location, right? You wouldn't want them to give you geographic coordinates, where it's 30.52 north latitude, whatever. Unless you're walking around with your own personal GPS, that's not going to be as useful. But there are going to be circumstances where absolute is useful. If it's a search and rescue, and you're trying to find someone lost in the forest, do you want to be told, try to find this person, or next to a tree? That's not going to be very helpful. Or you're lost at sea, and you tell them you're near water. Okay, so there are some circumstances where absolute location is definitely what you would want. In some situations where relative will be more useful. and some situations where they might be used in conjunction with each other. Now, the second one is a little more abstract. Location is fairly straightforward. Place is a little more subjective. So I'm going to give you a working definition, but I think through the examples, you'll have a better sense of what it is. Place is essentially a location that has meaning. It's a location that has meaning. So there are some characteristics about that location that make it special. That it's not just a location anymore, but it is a place. Okay, so it's a location that has meaning. So we often try to create places. We're trying to create a certain feeling. We'll probably see this most often in neighborhoods. You know, if you drive all around Fresno, it's all the same location technically, right? But is it all the same place? Well, of course not. Different neighborhoods will have different feelings. And an older neighborhood, say with tree-lined streets, will feel very different than, say, a gated community. They're very different types of environments, both with a different sense of place. So, for example, if you went into a new housing development to buy a house, you know, one of those newer housing developments where there's a bunch of lots and you get to pick from, 7 or 8 different styles of homes. There might be different variations of the homes, but they all kind of look alike. And what if you went in there and you said, I want to buy this lot, but I don't want any of those houses. I want to build my own house. And I want to live in a giant geodesic dome, a giant golf ball. How do you think that would go over? Probably not very well. Why? Because it would be out of place, right? They would say, wait a minute, we are trying to create something here, okay? We're trying to create a feeling, and you can't come in with your golf ball and change that. So we are always trying to create that sense of place in our buildings, in our parks, in our public spaces, in our neighborhoods. But it could be something smaller than that. It could be, say it was a big oak tree, and there was a proposal done, a wedding proposal underneath the oak tree. It could be 30 years later, and the couple could drive by, and the wife could look over to the husband and say, oh, honey, do you remember when you proposed to me under that tree? So that tree has now become a place. Now, for everyone else, it's just a tree. Nothing special about it. But for those people that were involved in that proposal, it has meaning. So it now has a sense of place. So that's what that meaning, when you hear that term sense of place, that's what that means. There's infused meaning into that location. So place is a very subjective term, because what can be a place for one person may not be a place for another person. Or how that one person interprets a place can be very different from how another person interprets a place. One may interpret that same place in a very positive manner. One may interpret the same place in a very negative manner. So it is very subjective. But we are always trying to create places and create a sense of place. Whether, like I said, whether it be in our parks, whether it be in our public spaces, or in our buildings. So location is just where something is. Place is actually infusing meaning into that, giving it special characteristics, or giving it meaningful characteristics that separate it from just a location on the surface of the earth. So I hope that better explains the difference between place and location. And in part 3, we will pick up with the remaining 3 themes.